Tomb Raider Legends is the latest installment in the adventures of Lara Croft. Lara Croft is always searching for the next lost artifact, and it takes her all over the world, and she always gets into these exotic locales and these crazy ruins where she faces all kinds of danger, but she does it with such style and flair that it's just really fun and an adventurous time. So Tomb Raider Legends has Lara searching for clues about what happened to her mother. You get this flashback of her mother's death, which happened when Lara was very young. And it's kind of a mysterious, kind of mystic flashback where the mother pulls out this sword and then gets sucked into this alternate world. So Lara doesn't really know what's going on, but she's bound and determined to figure it out. So she starts off by trying to figure out the secrets of this magic sword. But it turns out the sword's been broken up into a bunch of different pieces. So Lara has to go all over the world collecting these different pieces of the sword and also putting the mystery of her mother's death and her past back together. So that's really just an excuse for Lara to go from one exotic locale to the next. She goes from ruins to tombs in Africa, she goes to South America, she goes to Japan, England, you name it, she goes there. There's a good variety in the levels, and it's actually a lot of fun to go check out these different locales. Although you will see a lot of the same puzzles and a lot of the same stuff repeated in the levels. In true Tomb Raider fashion, Lara Croft spends all her time in these dark caves or ancient ruins where she can climb up cliffs, she can hang on ledges, she can vault off of poles, she can swing on ropes, and she can even use her magnetic grapple to swing from platform to platform and solve these puzzles. So basically Lara has a lot of moves at her disposal, and it's a lot of fun to vault around all these places because the environments really give you a great sense of danger, like you're high above these ruins on these cliff edges hanging by the tips of your fingers. And it's just a lot of fun. It's got a very Prince of Persia feel to it, the way that she acrobatically swings across ledges, goes from platform to platform, and gets in all these crazy situations, but does it with such style that it just seems effortless. There are also a lot of puzzles that you have to figure out in the game. Most of these puzzles are pretty standard, where you have to drag one box onto a switch, then go get another box and drag it onto another switch to open up the door. You'll see a lot of the same puzzles repeated over and over throughout the levels, except for instead of a wooden box, maybe you'll see a steel box. But there's really not a lot of variety in the puzzles, and although they're challenging the first time you see them, once you figure out the patterns in the game, it's pretty easy to get past all the puzzles, and then once you figure out each puzzle once, there's no more challenge left in the game. So when you aren't hanging off ledges or pulling around boxes, you can also get into a bunch of gunfights. There's your generic bad guys who come up and try to foil your plans, try to get the artifact before you do, and of course you got to put a stop to it. So Lara's got her dual pistols, which is the standard archaeologist equipment, but she can also pick up any weapons that the enemies drop. So she can get a grenade launcher, an assault rifle, grenades, and so on. The weapons are kind of weak though, and since the pistols have unlimited ammo, it's just as easy to use those all the time, and there really isn't much of a difference. The gunplay is kind of weak. You can do some pretty cool moves like slide tackling the guy up into the air and then shooting him from below, or bouncing off his head and then it switches into like a slow motion mode where you can shoot the guy for more damage. The gunplay really isn't that exciting, but it's also not really the focus of the game. You'll spend a lot more time on the platform puzzles and the box puzzles and things like that. Tomb Raider Legend looks great on all the platforms, but it definitely looks a lot better on the Xbox 360 thanks to some sharper detail and some little bit better lighting effects. The camera is still kind of a problem sometimes. It gets frustrating when you're on some ledge trying to make a jump and you can't quite see where you're trying to go. But that's really the exception rather than the rule here. For the most part, the camera is actually pretty good. Also, there's some frame rate issues where the frame rate will slow down, but it doesn't ever get to unplayable levels. It's still manageable, but it doesn't quite run as smoothly as you'd like. That said, it still looks really great on the Xbox 360, and it looks good on the Xbox and PS2 too. The controls are probably the best on the Xbox 360, although the PS2 and Xbox controllers work fine as well. If you like previous Tomb Raider games, you'll definitely like this one because it really captures the spirit of the original Tomb Raider games, which were all about exploring these new places and, using all these great, fantastic moves that Lara had at her disposal. This game does all of that a lot. There's also some new stuff in this game. There's a few motorcycle levels where you're chasing after enemy vehicles on a motorcycle, shooting bad guys and whatnot. There's also interactive cutscenes, which are very much like the ones in Resident Evil 4, where you have to press a button at a certain time and then Lara will perform an action on screen, and the cutscene turns out differently depending on how you perform. There's some really funny death animations too if you fail these, so you might want to actually die a few times just for kicks. But really, this game is perfect for anybody who's just looking for a fun, fairly easy, but still really enjoyable game. The game is pretty short and it ends kind of abruptly. There's a few levels and there's a good variety in the levels, but still it feels like it ends too soon. You can beat the game in under 7 hours and then there's really no reason to play it again. You can try to beat the game in faster time or find all the secret objects to unlock outfits or cinematics or character models, but really the game is pretty much play it once and you'll probably forget about it. That said, it's still a really fun game.